The night sky over the Orion sector was quiet, too quiet for a border patrol that was used to hearing the constant hum of scanners and communication beacons. The silence felt heavy, almost expectant, like the stars themselves were holding their breath. On the bridge of the Imperial frigate Valen's Pride, Lieutenant Commander Rion leaned forward in his chair, eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. A strange pattern of light was flickering on the edge of the sensor range. At first he thought it was just interference from the nearby nebula, but the rhythm was too perfect, too intentional. It repeated every 32 seconds like a coded pulse. He ran the signal through the ship's translation core, expecting it to return as unreadable noise. Instead, the system hesitated, then displayed something that made his heart stop. The symbols were ancient Terran characters, a language that had not been used in over 5 centuries. Rion called for his captain, and within moments the bridge was filled with the soft hum of boots and quiet whispers. Captain Irel stood by the viewport, watching the flickering stars beyond the glass. Her voice was calm, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her nerves. She ordered a full spectrum scan, but when the data returned, it only deepened the confusion. Something massive was out there, moving slowly through the void. It wasn't broadcasting an identification code, and it wasn't showing up in any Imperial database. Its shape was hard to read because the sensors kept distorting, as if the ship itself was wrapped in a field that bent light and radiation around it. Still, the computer managed to produce a faint silhouette. It looked like a warship. Not just any warship, but one built in a way the Empire hadn't seen for generations. Hard lines, sharp angles, solid armor, no organic curves or sleek plating like modern designs. It was old, purposeful, and terrifyingly human. The captain stood frozen as the word human appeared on the side of the holographic display. It wasn't possible. Humans were gone. Every record said they had been destroyed at the end of the Galactic Unification Wars. Earth itself was nothing but dust and scattered rock, and no colony from the old Terran Empire had ever resurfaced. The official history books called it the extinction, a tragic but necessary end to a violent species that refused to submit to the galactic order. Yet here it was, a ship carrying an ancient human insignia, a circular mark with blue and white stripes, the letters barely visible beneath centuries of decay. Uns for a long moment, no one spoke. The bridge was filled only with the low hum of engines and the faint buzz of monitors. Captain Irel finally broke the silence, her voice cold and measured. She ordered an immediate transmission to Central Command on Vareth Prime. Within minutes, the encrypted message shot through hyperspace channels toward the Imperial capital. The signal included the recorded transmission and the image of the mysterious ship. Then she gave a quiet command to the crew to maintain distance and avoid any provocation. Rion nodded, though he couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. The strange signal continued to pulse through the void, now stronger, as if it knew they were listening. Hours passed. The ship remained motionless at the edge of the nebula, its dark hull reflecting faint starlight. Some of the younger crew members began to whisper stories, the old myths about humanity. They said humans were monsters, conquerors who once tried to dominate the stars. Others said they were geniuses, the first race to reach the stars before any other. There were even rumors that the Galactic Empire's own technology had been built upon the ruins of human science. But most dismissed these as propaganda or old spacer tales told to frighten cadets. Rion wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Suddenly, the communication console flickered. A voice came through the static, deep and calm, speaking in a language so old the ship's translation system took several seconds to process it. "This is the United Nations ship Resolute. Identify yourselves." The bridge went silent again. Rion's hands trembled as he replayed the message. The tone was steady, confident, and unmistakably human. He turned toward the captain, waiting for her command. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the darkness beyond the viewport, where the faint outline of the massive vessel now glowed softly under the distant light of the nebula. She ordered the communications officer to respond, using the standard galactic channel. "This is Captain Irel of the Imperial frigate Valen's Pride of the Galactic Empire. You are entering restricted space. Identify your origin and purpose." There was a pause, long enough to make everyone uneasy. Then the voice returned. "Your presence in this sector is unauthorized. You are trespassing in Sol Command territory." The last words hit the crew like a physical blow. Sol Command? the ancient Human Defense Authority, had been erased from existence centuries ago. No maps contained any reference to a Sol Command jurisdiction. Even Earth's coordinates were officially marked as forbidden space. Captain Arell felt a shiver crawl down her spine. She ordered another scan. The computer returned impossible results. The ship's core reactor readings were beyond the capacity of any known Imperial or Allied technology. The hull composition showed traces of metals that no longer existed in natural form. And worse, the vessel seemed to be generating an energy field that disrupted all nearby systems, as though reality itself bent slightly around it. The science officer whispered that the technology resembled something from the classified archives, theoretical human quantum shielding. But that was just myth, or it was supposed to be. Rion watched as the bridge lights dimmed slightly. The ship's sensors began to falter, static filling the holographic displays. It was as if the human vessel was not just observing them, but scanning them in return, reading every frequency, every code, every life sign aboard. Then the human voice returned, softer this time. "You shouldn't be here." The captain clenched her fists. "Who are you?" "Humanity was destroyed long ago." The voice answered, "History lies. We endured." Then the transmission ended. Within the hour, the Imperial communication networks were in chaos. Every relay station across the Orion border had picked up fragments of the same message. Some ships reported power failures and strange gravitational shifts. Others claimed to have seen the faint glimmer of more vessels hidden deep within the nebula. The report spread quickly through the ranks, and by the time the transmission reached the Imperial Council, panic had begun to set in. On the homeworld of Vareth Prime, the Imperial Council assembled in the Grand Chamber, a towering hall of glass and marble that overlooked the glowing city below. The Emperor sat in silence as his ministers argued. Some insisted it was a trick, perhaps a rebellion using old human symbols to stir fear. Others warned that the energy readings were genuine and unlike anything seen since the early days of the Galactic War. The intelligence director presented data showing the exact frequency of the human signal. It matched ancient records of Terran distress beacons from before the fall of Earth. The Emperor listened without a word. Finally, he stood and turned toward the central holomap, where the faint red glow of the Orion sector flickered ominously. His voice was calm but heavy with unease. "Send a message to the fleet. Contain this threat. Do not engage until ordered." Far away on the Valen's Pride, Rion watched the mysterious ship drift slowly across their scanners. It wasn't moving toward them or away. It just hovered there, massive and silent like a sleeping god. The crew's nerves were fraying. Some whispered that they should retreat before it decided to destroy them. Others thought it might be trying to communicate something deeper, something their technology couldn't yet understand. Rion found himself thinking about the stories his grandfather used to tell when he was a boy. He had been a scholar, fascinated by human history even though studying it was discouraged. He used to say that humans were both destroyers and dreamers, that they had built wonders and horrors in equal measure. He said their greatest strength was not their weapons or their machines, but their stubborn will to survive, no matter how impossible the odds. Rion never believed those tales. But now, staring at the impossible ship floating before him, he wondered if perhaps his grandfather had been right. As the ship's sensors flickered again, Rion saw something that made his breath catch. The hull of the human vessel shifted, panels moving as if alive. For a moment, the shape of the ship resembled a face, cold, emotionless, but unmistakably human. Then the image vanished and the signal cut out. The captain ordered the ship to retreat to a safe distance. Engines hummed to life and the stars began to shift. But even as they moved away, the feeling of being watched never left them. Somewhere, deep in that dark nebula, something ancient had awakened, something that carried the memory of a world long gone and a people who had refused to vanish. Back on the bridge, Rion stared out into the endless dark. The human voice echoed in his mind, calm, confident, haunting. "You shouldn't be here." He didn't know if it was a warning or a promise, but he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was about to remember humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again. The council chamber on Vareth Prime was tense as the Emperor sat in silence while the room buzzed with fear and argument. The news had spread across every planet in the Empire within hours. Human ship, old and massive, had appeared near the Orion border. The reports were clear enough to prove it was not a ghost or a trick. The energy readings were unlike anything the Empire had ever recorded. No one could deny it now. A real human battleship was in Imperial space and it was awake. The Empire had always told its people that humanity had died out long ago after they refused to join the Galactic Alliance. But now that story had shattered. The ministers and generals shouted over one another, trying to decide if it was a threat or a myth come to life. The Emperor raised his hand and the noise stopped. His eyes were dark and calm, but there was a weight behind them that no one dared to question. He ordered silence and demanded a report from the Science Council. The lead scientist stepped forward. His voice trembled as he explained that the ship had not appeared by accident. The radiation signature suggested that it had come from a deep subspace jump, the kind of travel thought impossible without tearing space itself apart. The ship had not entered through a gate or corridor. It had simply appeared out of nowhere, as if it had been hiding in another layer of reality. The scientist's words made the council uneasy. He said that the ship carried traces of technology older than any known Empire design, and possibly more advanced than their current fleets. He said it was not only alive, but aware. It had scanned Imperial communication networks, bypassed security firewalls, and vanished from sensor logs at will. The military commander demanded to send a full fleet to destroy it before panic spread through the colonies. But the intelligence director warned against it. He said that if this ship was truly a human vessel, and if more existed somewhere, then attacking it might start a war they could not win. The Emperor listened to every word, and then looked at the map of the Orion sector glowing in the air before him. He knew that this was not just a military problem. It was something far greater. He ordered the Imperial Navy to move discreetly. They were to monitor the area but avoid direct confrontation until they knew what they were facing. Far from the council chamber, deep in the border region, the crew of the Valen's Pride remained in silent orbit near the edge of the nebula. The mysterious ship still hovered there like a ghost. No other signals had been received since the last message, but the energy readings showed small fluctuations, as if the ship was alive and breathing. Lieutenant Rian sat by the viewport staring at it. His thoughts were heavy and restless. The human ship seemed to be studying them. Every time they sent a probe closer, it vanished without a trace. The captain tried to maintain discipline, but fear had started to spread through the crew. They had seen ships disappear before, but never like this. Rian remembered the voice that had come through the static. It had not sounded angry or hostile. It sounded calm, like someone who had seen everything already and had nothing left to fear. He couldn't stop thinking about those words, about soul command and the strange warning. He wondered if humans had survived somewhere hidden beyond the known galaxy. Maybe they had never died at all, but had waited for the right time to return. He knew how impossible it sounded, yet the evidence floated right before his eyes. The captain called for a private channel to command. When the Emperor's orders arrived, she read them silently and then gathered her officers. The message was simple. Maintain distance, observe, and under no condition open fire. The Emperor himself wanted to know more before deciding. The captain understood, but she also knew the risk. The longer they stayed near that ship, the more danger they faced. The crew was restless, and whispers spread that the human ship might not be alone. Some claimed to have seen faint shadows moving through the nebula's mist, like smaller shapes following the same path. Rian began to record every signal and visual feed in secret, hoping to preserve evidence in case they didn't make it back. He wasn't sure why, but something deep inside him felt that this was more than a mission. It was history repeating itself. Late that cycle, as most of the crew slept, a new transmission came through. It wasn't a voice this time. It was an image. The ship's monitors lit up with a blurry hologram of a planet, blue and green, surrounded by a ring of debris. Rian recognized it instantly from his grandfather's old books. It was Earth, the home of humanity. The image lasted only seconds before disappearing, but it left everyone speechless. When the captain tried to trace the source, the system shut down completely. Every monitor went dark, and a deep vibration echoed through the ship as if space itself had shifted. Then the power returned, and the radar showed the human ship moving closer. It was massive now, its black hull reflecting the faint light of the stars. The captain ordered full alert, but before any weapon could be armed, the ship stopped again. A beam of light scanned the entire Imperial vessel. The voice returned. "You have forgotten where you came from. The message was simple, emotionless, and final. Then the beam vanished, and the ship retreated back into the nebula. Hours later, the Valen's Pride sent another encrypted message to command. The captain requested immediate reinforcements, fearing that the human ship might not be alone. The Emperor received the report at dawn and stared at it in silence. His advisors begged him to declare a state of emergency, but he refused. He knew the panic that would follow. Instead, he ordered the fleet to move quietly into the sector. 3 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and a command ship set course for the Orion border. The Empire was preparing for something it did not understand. Meanwhile, on a distant colony world called Norian 9, the first rumors reached the civilians. Traders claimed that an ancient Terran ship had been seen near the outer rim. Old veterans whispered that the humans had finally come back to reclaim what was once theirs. The people of the Empire had always been taught to fear humans, yet deep down there was something else: curiosity. For centuries, stories had been told about humanity's strength, courage, and defiance. Even though their empire had fallen, their memory had never truly died. Children learned about the old Earth explorers who first mapped the stars, and the scientists who built machines that could bend time. Now those same legends felt real again. On Vareth Prime, the Emperor held a private meeting with his closest advisors. He asked the intelligence director what he knew about the ancient Terran archives. The man hesitated, but then revealed that the Empire had secretly preserved fragments of human technology, hidden deep beneath the capital in secure vaults. Some of it had been too dangerous to study. When the Emperor demanded to see them, the director agreed, though fear crossed his face. Deep beneath the palace, in a cold metallic chamber, old relics were stored under heavy guard. Broken machines, data cores, and fragments of starship hulls from the last Terran fleet. The Emperor walked among them slowly. Each object told a story of a people who had once ruled the stars. He could almost feel their presence, as if their spirit had never left. He turned to his advisor and asked a simple question. What if they never died? The director didn't answer. Far away in the Orion Nebula, the human ship known as the UNS Resolute remained silent. Inside its dark corridors, lights flickered softly. The crew moved with quiet precision, their uniforms worn but clean, their eyes focused and calm. Captain Harlan Reyes stood before the main viewport, watching the Imperial patrols move cautiously around the edge of the nebula. His face was weathered, his expression thoughtful. He had expected this moment for years. His people had prepared in secret, hidden beyond the galaxy's edge where the Empire's influence could not reach. They had rebuilt what was lost and waited until the stars aligned again. A younger officer approached and said that the Imperials had sent more ships. The captain nodded. He wasn't surprised. He ordered them to maintain cloak and observe. The humans didn't want war, not yet. They had returned to see what the galaxy had become. But the captain knew the Empire's fear would lead them to attack sooner or later. He remembered the last days of Earth, the evacuation ships, the fire, the endless flight into deep space. Humanity had survived not by strength alone, but by refusing to give up. He looked at the glowing display showing the Imperial fleet gathering near the border and whispered softly, "They still don't understand." The Empire's scanners struggled to keep track of the human ship. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. It was as if it could slip between space itself. Panic spread through the communication channels. The commander of the reinforcement fleet demanded immediate permission to engage, but the Emperor's orders remained the same. Observe, do not fire. Yet the tension in every ship was rising. The sight of that old Terran insignia floating in the dark filled every officer with dread. Back on the Valen's Pride, Rian stood by the observation deck alone. He looked out into the endless night and thought about the stories he had once dismissed. He realized that the galaxy had never truly understood what humanity was capable of. They had feared them, erased them, and tried to forget them, but humans had done what they always did: they survived. He didn't know what would happen next, but deep down he felt that something was coming, something that would change everything the Empire believed in. As the stars shimmered in the distance, the silent shape of the human ship drifted once more through the mist, like a shadow returning from a long-forgotten past, waiting for the right moment to remind the galaxy that humanity endures. The Imperial fleet arrived at the Orion border, under a silent sky that stretched forever. The stars looked cold and distant, and every ship moved carefully as if afraid to make too much noise. The command vessel, the Imperial cruiser Varanus, led the formation. its silver hull gleaming faintly under the light of the nebula. Inside, Admiral Terran stood before the large view window, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the dark patch of space where the human ship had last been seen. He had read all the reports, every detail from the Valen's Pride and the first encounter. The recordings of the voice still echoed in his mind. He had been a child when he first heard stories about the humans, how they had fought to the end and vanished. He had never believed those old tales, but now standing here, he wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The Imperial ships spread out in a wide arc, scanners active, weapons charged but hidden from view. No one wanted to start a war by mistake. They moved slowly into the nebula, surrounded by swirling blue mist that hid everything more than a few kilometers away. The sensors picked up strange energy readings that flickered in and out like ghosts. The science officer reported that the readings were not natural. Something in the nebula was distorting the signals. The admiral ordered the ships to maintain communication and report any visual contact. On board the Valen's Pride, Rion sat at his console, his eyes tired but alert. He had barely slept since the encounter. The human ship was still out there, unseen but not gone. He could feel it. The captain had told everyone to stay calm, but fear had settled deep in the crew's hearts. Every small sound made them tense. Even the hum of the engines felt louder than before. Rion kept checking his radar again and again, hoping for a sign, but all he saw was static. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and the ship trembled slightly. The captain demanded a report, but before anyone could answer, the radar came alive. A massive shape appeared behind them, silent and close. The bridge fell quiet. The human ship had returned. It was closer than before, its size filling the viewport. Its black metal surface was covered in marks of age and battle, yet it looked alive, powerful and untouched by time. Rion felt his heart race. He knew they were being watched again. The ship's scanners tried to focus on the object, but the readings made no sense. The system said it was both solid and not solid, there and not there, as if it existed between dimensions. The captain tried to send a message, but before she could, the speakers crackled, and the same calm human voice filled the air. This territory is under Sol Command protection. Withdraw immediately. Admiral Terran, hearing the transmission through the fleet network, ordered all ships to hold position. He sent a response on all channels, stating that the Galactic Empire sought peaceful communication. There was a long pause before the voice returned. You claim peace, yet your fleets are armed. We remember what your peace meant to Earth. The words cut deep into every officer listening. The admiral answered that humanity was gone, that their world had fallen long ago. The voice replied quietly. You destroyed our home, but not our people. Then the transmission ended again. In the command room of the Varanis, silence followed. The admiral turned to his staff and asked for a full scan of the ship's origin point. The sensors picked up faint trails of quantum particles leading deeper into the nebula. They were traces of jump energy, proof that the human ship had traveled through some kind of hidden gate or corridor. No known technology could create such stable wormholes without massive stations, yet this ship seemed to do it alone. The science officer whispered that it was impossible. The admiral didn't answer. On the human ship, the UNS Resolute, Captain Harlan Reyes watched the Imperial fleet through the transparent forward screen. His crew moved quietly behind him, running scans and monitoring communications. The admiral's voice had sounded calm but uncertain. Reyes could tell they were afraid. He had studied the Empire for years. Their technology was advanced, but their spirit had grown weak. They believed in control, not courage. Humanity had once been like them, and that had nearly destroyed them all. Reyes had no wish to start another war, but he knew the Empire would not rest until it understood what they were. He ordered his crew to prepare for Phase 2. The younger officer, Lieutenant Nira, asked softly if they were really going to reveal themselves. Reyes looked at her and said that the galaxy had forgotten who gave it light. It was time to remind them. She nodded and activated the main console. The lights dimmed and the ship's engines shifted in tone. A deep hum filled the air. Then from the center of the nebula, a second ship appeared, identical in design but smaller. Then a third. Then a fourth. Within minutes, dozens of massive shadows emerged from the mist. The Imperial fleet began to panic as alarms went off across every ship. Rion stared in disbelief. The sky outside had changed. What had once been empty space was now filled with enormous dark ships, each carrying the same old human insignia. He counted at least 20 before losing track. They moved slowly, gracefully forming a loose formation around the Resolute. The captain of the Valen's Pride tried to contact the flagship, but interference blocked all communication. The human fleet didn't fire. They didn't move closer. They simply waited. On the command ship Varanis, Admiral Terran stood frozen. He ordered the fleet to hold fire. The humans had not attacked, and to fire first would be suicide. He asked his communication officer to open a direct channel to the lead human vessel. After several attempts, a clear voice answered. "This is Captain Reyes of the United Nations ship Resolute. Identify yourself." The admiral replied with his name and title and said that the Galactic Empire had no intention of conflict. The human captain responded, "Intentions are words. History remembers actions." The admiral tried to reason with him, asking why the humans had returned after so long. Reyes paused and then said, "We never left. We waited, we watched. And now we are here because the balance of the stars must be restored." The admiral didn't understand. He asked what that meant, but the human captain ended the call. A bright light began to shine from the human flagship, spreading across the nebula. Every Imperial sensor went dark, overwhelmed by the surge of power. Then just as quickly it vanished. When the systems came back online, the human fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not moved, simply gone. There was no trace of energy or movement. It was as if they had never existed at all. The Imperial ship sat in silence, engines humming softly. The admiral stood at the window staring at the empty stars. He ordered all ships to regroup and return to the nearest base. The Empire had just seen something beyond its control. He knew the Council would demand answers, but he had none. He could only report what he had witnessed. Humanity was alive, and they had technology the Empire could not understand. As the fleet turned back toward Imperial space, the Valen's Pride followed at the rear. Rion couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. The human ships had appeared like ghosts and vanished just as suddenly. He felt both fear and wonder. Part of him wanted to believe that they were not enemies but something else, something greater. He looked out into the fading glow of the nebula and whispered to himself, wondering if they were watching still. Back on Varith Prime, the Emperor received the report in private. He read every word in silence, then dismissed his advisors. When he was alone, he looked out at the city lights below. The thought of humanity returning filled him with dread. He knew their history, the wars, the defiance, the fire that once consumed the stars. The Empire had been built on their ashes, and if they had truly returned, then everything might fall apart. Yet another part of him, quiet and buried deep inside, felt something else. Hope. Because if the humans had survived the impossible, then maybe the galaxy itself still had something left to learn. Far beyond the reach of Imperial scanners, hidden in the dark between stars, the human fleet moved together in silence. Captain Reyes stood on the bridge of the Resolute watching as the nebula faded behind them. His crew waited for his command. He told them to stay hidden, to prepare for the next phase. They would reveal themselves when the time was right. Humanity had waited 5 centuries to return, and now the galaxy would soon remember their name. In the quiet hum of the engines, the captain closed his eyes and whispered, "For Earth. For all we lost. For all that still lives." And the ship drifted forward into the endless dark where stars were waiting to be claimed once more. Imperial Council gathered again in the grand chamber under the gray light of dawn. The Emperor sat on his high seat motionless, his expression calm but cold. The air in the room felt heavy because no one wanted to be the first to speak. The reports from the Orion border had arrived hours ago, and the information was both shocking and unbelievable. A fleet of human ships had appeared and vanished as if the stars themselves had swallowed them. No weapons had been fired, but the power those ships displayed had left the Empire shaken. Some ministers believed it was an illusion, while others whispered that the humans had returned to claim revenge. The Emperor listened in silence as his generals argued. One shouted that the fleet must prepare for war, while another said they should send a message of peace. The Emperor raised his hand and the room fell silent. He said quietly that fear would not help them. They would investigate and learn who these humans were before deciding what must be done. Far away, the Imperial fleet was returning from the nebula. Admiral Terran sat in his command chair looking out into the stars. He had seen many things in his years of service, but nothing like what had happened there. He kept replaying the last message from the human captain in his mind. The words were calm, but they carried an old kind of strength, the kind that didn't need threats. He wondered what kind of people could disappear like ghosts and control such power. He ordered the fleet to maintain radio silence until they were out of the border zone. The crew obeyed without question, their faces pale and eyes hollow. No one wanted to speak about what they had seen because the fear was too great. On board the Valen's Pride, Rion sat alone in the observation deck. The stars outside looked peaceful and endless, but he could not forget the shapes he had seen in the nebula. The human ships had been silent and beautiful in a strange way, like memories of something ancient and proud. He wondered if the humans had really survived all this time or if they were something else now, something beyond human. The captain joined him quietly and said that command had ordered full debriefing once they returned. She didn't sound pleased. Rion asked her if she believed the humans wanted war. The captain took a long breath before answering that she didn't know, but she feared that the Empire would not wait to find out. When the fleet reached Varith Prime, they were met with strict security. Every officer and crew member was questioned by the intelligence division. Their ships were scanned and their recordings sealed. Rion was ordered to sign a report stating that he would not speak of the encounter outside military channels. He signed, but inside he knew the truth could not be hidden for long. Too many people had seen it. Too many ships had detected the signals. Rumors were already spreading across the colonies. Meanwhile, in a distant corner of the galaxy, the human fleet gathered in a hidden system where an old red sun burned dimly. The UNS Resolute led the formation as the smaller ships took positions around it. Inside the command center, Captain Reyes watched the holographic map showing the positions of the Imperial patrols. His officers reported that the Empire had increased surveillance along the border, but had made no move to attack. Reyes nodded and said that it was expected. He knew the Empire would not act without understanding who they faced. Humanity had learned long ago that fear was the most powerful weapon. The humans had been hiding for 5 centuries in the Outer Veil, a region of space unreachable by normal travel. When Earth fell, a few thousand ships escaped under the command of Sol Command. They had traveled beyond the galaxy, built hidden colonies, and survived in silence. Over time, they rebuilt their technology, combining old science with new discoveries. They had watched the Empire grow, rise, and become proud, forgetting the past. Now they were ready to return not for war but for remembrance. Humanity had seen too much destruction to seek it again, but they would not allow history to forget who they were. Lieutenant Nira entered the command deck and handed the captain a small data slate. It contained reports from scouts who had been monitoring Imperial communication lines. The Empire was confused, divided, and afraid. Some wanted peace while others wanted to strike first. Reyes studied the information and said that fear would make them dangerous. He ordered Nira to prepare a signal relay. They would send a message to the Empire soon, but first they needed to test the response of their defense network. In the capital city of Varith Prime, the Emperor met with his intelligence director in private. They stood in a quiet room lined with ancient artifacts from before the Empire's founding. The director placed a small device on the table and activated it. A hologram appeared showing fragments of the human transmission. The Emperor listened carefully to the calm voice and the words that followed. "We never left. We watched. The stars remember us," the Emperor frowned. He asked the director if they could trace the source, but the man shook his head. The technology used was far beyond their understanding. The signal seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Emperor ordered the director to find the truth, no matter the cost. Back in the hidden system, Captain Reyes gathered his senior officers. They stood around a circular table while the map of the galaxy glowed in the center. He told them that the time to stay hidden was ending. The galaxy had changed, but not enough. The Empire had forgotten that it was humanity who had first united the stars. He said that their mission was not conquest, but awakening. They would remind the galaxy of what humans had built, and of the price of forgetting their origins. The crew listened silently. Many of them were descendants of the survivors from the old Earth fleet. They had grown up hearing stories of the blue planet and the burning skies during the final war. To them, this mission was not just duty, it was destiny. The communications officer announced that the signal relay was ready. Captain Reyes gave a single order: "Send it." A low hum filled the air as the ship's long-range transmitters came online. Across the galaxy, Imperial communication relays flickered. On every military channel, the same message appeared. It was short and simple. "Humanity endures." The words echoed through space like a whisper carried by light. Within minutes, the message reached the farthest colonies and outer stations. Panic and confusion spread instantly. Civilians began to ask questions the Empire could not answer. On the Valen's Pride, Rian was monitoring the relay channels when the message appeared on his console. He stared at it for a long time, reading the words over and over. Humanity endures. He felt a strange mix of fear and awe. The captain came to his station, saw the same message, and ordered it reported to command. But she couldn't hide the look in her eyes. It was as if she too felt that something greater than fear was awakening. At the Imperial Palace, the Emperor received the report within seconds. The council gathered again, this time in chaos. The ministers argued loudly, some demanding to declare war and others begging to negotiate. The Emperor stood and said that war would destroy them. He ordered that a message be sent back asking for peaceful contact. The decision surprised everyone. The Empire had never asked for peace first. But the Emperor knew that strength did not always come from weapons. It came from knowing when to listen. The response came almost immediately. The same calm voice filled the chamber through the communication system. "We will meet you, but not on your terms. Come to the place where your stars were born." The transmission ended and the coordinates appeared on the screen. It was a system long forgotten by the Empire, a system once called Sol, the home of Earth. The council fell silent. No one dared to speak. The Emperor looked at the coordinates for a long time and then said they would go. He would send a small delegation led by Admiral Terran to make contact. It was a dangerous decision, but he knew it had to be done. If humanity had truly returned, the Empire needed to understand them. Far from the capital, in the quiet of space, the Resolute and its fleet prepared for the meeting. Captain Reyes stood by the viewport watching the stars. He thought of the world that once was, of blue oceans and green fields, and of the billions who had perished. He felt no hate, only resolve. He whispered to himself that this time they would not let history repeat itself. Humanity had come back not to destroy, but to remind the galaxy of its roots. As the human fleet began to move toward the old Sol system, the stars ahead glowed faintly like a path leading home. And somewhere deep in his heart, Captain Reyes felt the weight of every generation that had waited for this moment. The galaxy was waking up to an old truth. The humans were not a myth or a ghost story. They were real, they were alive, and they were coming back to the place where everything had begun. The Imperial flagship Eternus glided through the black sea of stars on its way to the Sol system. Admiral Terran stood at the wide glass window, staring at the endless darkness that stretched before him. Behind that darkness waited something older than their empire, something that had once shaped everything they knew. The fleet moved in silent formation, their engines glowing faintly blue, each ship carrying both fear and hope. The Emperor had trusted Terran to lead this mission because he was known for his calm and reason, not for blind loyalty to war. Yet even he felt a strange unease building in his chest. He kept wondering what awaited them in the ancient system humans had once called home. The journey took several days through folded space. During the long travel hours, the crew whispered among themselves. Some said they were heading into a trap. Others believed they would find ruins and ghosts, not people. Rian sat quietly in his quarters, replaying the message that had spread through the galaxy. Humanity endures. The words echoed inside his head like a heartbeat. He had grown up thinking humans were myths used to scare children or stories told by old soldiers. Now he was flying straight toward them. The thought made him feel both small and alive. When the fleet emerged from jump space, they saw the Sol system stretched before them. The central star burned golden and calm, and the planets circled it in silent rhythm. The scanners showed that Earth was still there, covered in clouds and scars, but alive. The ship's sensors picked up faint signals from the surface. No one spoke for a long time. It was as if every person on board was holding their breath, afraid to disturb the silence of something sacred. Then the captain's voice came through the intercom, saying they had received coordinates for a meeting point near the orbit of Mars. The human fleet was waiting. As the Imperial ships moved closer, small lights began to appear in the dark. One by one, human vessels came into view, their hulls reflecting faint blue light. They were larger than the Empire's ships and carried an air of quiet strength. The largest one, the UNS Resolute, moved ahead of the others and stopped. For a few moments, nothing happened. The space between the two fleets felt heavy with tension. Then a signal request appeared on the main screen. Admiral Terran gave a nod and the transmission was accepted. The image that appeared was simple but striking. A man in a dark uniform stood before a plain background, the emblem of a blue circle with white stars behind him. His eyes were calm but sharp. He introduced himself as Captain Reyes of the United Nations of Humanity. His voice carried the same quiet authority that had shaken the Empire's councils weeks ago. He said he welcomed them to Sol and that this meeting was meant for understanding, not conflict. Terran introduced himself and thanked the captain for allowing them safe passage. He said the Empire wished to learn the truth about who they were and what they wanted. Reyes nodded and said that was fair. He explained that humanity had never truly vanished. When Earth was destroyed by wars and greed, a small part of them escaped beyond the known galaxy. They built new worlds, new ways of living, and watched as the Empire rose and forgot the people who had once given them light. He said they had stayed away because the galaxy needed time to grow without fear of the past. But now the Empire's power had begun to crush others, and history was repeating itself. They had returned not to conquer, but to remind the stars that unity came from shared roots, not from chains. The words struck deep in Terran's mind. He knew that what Reyes said was true. The Empire had grown proud and careless, forgetting compassion. He asked if humanity planned to interfere with Imperial rule. Reyes shook his head and said that humanity had no wish to rule anyone. They only wanted the truth to be known again. They would not allow the Empire to erase history. Then the screen faded and a new message appeared on Terran's console. The humans had invited him and a small group to land on Mars to speak in person. The landing was quiet and careful. A shuttle carried Admiral Terran, Rion, and a few officers through the thin red atmosphere. The surface of Mars stretched out beneath them, endless plains of rust and stone. In the distance, they saw a great structure built of silver and glass shining under the pale sun. It was a human city, alive and full of movement. When they landed, they were greeted by a group of men and women wearing simple uniforms. No weapons, no guards, only calm faces. Captain Reyes was waiting at the base of the ramp. He extended his hand in greeting. Terran hesitated for only a moment before taking it. The handshake was brief but heavy with meaning. They walked through the city in silence. The streets were clean and filled with soft light. People moved quietly but not fearfully. Terran noticed how their eyes followed them, curious but not angry. He saw children playing near the walkways and old men sitting near gardens. The air smelled of iron and wind. It was a strange mix of ancient and new. Reyes led them to a building that stood at the edge of a wide valley. Inside, the walls were covered with images of stars, ships, and faces. It was a museum of memory, a place built to remember the time before the fall. Reyes stopped before a large window showing Earth far in the distance. He said softly that this was where it all began. He told Terran that when Earth fell, humanity promised never to let their story be forgotten. They rebuilt not for power but for balance. Terran listened quietly, feeling something stir inside him. He said the Empire would not believe stories alone. Reyes smiled faintly and said they had expected that. He led them deeper into the building until they reached a chamber filled with holographic images. With a motion of his hand, the room came alive. Scenes of old Earth appeared around them, cities glowing, oceans shining, people walking under blue skies. Rion felt his chest tighten as he watched. It was so different from the worlds he knew, where metal and fear ruled. He whispered that it was beautiful. Reyes turned and said softly that it was home. Then the images changed. They showed war, fire, and destruction. The oceans boiled, the cities burned, and the sky turned black. Reyes said this was the price of forgetting where they came from. He said the Empire was heading down the same path. Terran stood still for a long time, watching the final image of Earth in ruins. Then he said the Empire must hear this truth. Reyes nodded and said they would allow the Emperor to see what they had shown. He said that humanity wanted peace, but peace must be built on truth. He gave Terran a small data crystal containing the recordings and the message of their return. Then he said something that stayed in Terran's mind. He said that every empire believes it is eternal, until it remembers it was once born from something smaller, something human. When the delegation returned to the ship, the crew waited in silence. Terran said nothing until they were back on the bridge. Then he ordered the fleet to prepare for departure. As the ships lifted away from Mars, Rion looked back at the red planet and felt like he was leaving something behind, something pure and forgotten. The Imperial fleet entered jump space and began the long journey home. During the return, Terran sat alone in his quarters, staring at the data crystal. He played the recordings over and over, the images of Earth before and after its fall, the faces of children, the cries of the dying, the silence of the stars afterward. He knew what he had to do, but he also knew it would not be easy. The Empire did not like to be reminded of its weaknesses. He closed his eyes and whispered that maybe it was time for change. When the fleet finally reached Vareth Prime, the Emperor was waiting. The council gathered once again in the Grand Chamber. Terran stood before them and placed the data crystal on the table. He told them everything he had seen, every word spoken by Captain Reyes. The lights dimmed and the images filled the chamber. For the first time, the Empire saw the truth. They saw the world that had given them life and the destruction that had almost erased it. When the lights returned, the room was silent. The Emperor stood slowly and said that the truth was clear. The humans had returned and they were not the enemy. Some ministers shouted in protest, saying the humans were a threat. Others whispered that maybe this was a chance to change. The Emperor looked at Terran and said that the Empire had ruled through fear for too long. If humanity could survive such loss and still choose peace, maybe the Empire could learn the same. He ordered that a message of alliance be prepared. That night, as the stars over Vareth Prime shone cold and distant, Rian stood by a window in the officers' quarters and looked up. He thought about the red planet, the calm eyes of Captain Reyes, and the blue glow of the ancient Earth in the sky. For the first time, he felt proud not as a soldier of the Empire, but as a child of the same stars that had once belonged to humans. Far away in the hidden human city on Mars, Captain Reyes looked up at the same stars and whispered that the first step had been taken. The galaxy was beginning to remember, and the silence of centuries was finally breaking. The Emperor sat alone in the silent chamber before dawn. The pale light from the twin moons fell across the floor as he looked out through the tall windows at the capital below. The words of Admiral Terran echoed in his mind. Humanity endures. He had watched the recordings again and again through the night, and each time the feeling inside him grew stronger. It was not fear anymore. It was something else, something he had not felt since his youth. It was humility. He had seen how the humans had survived after losing everything, and how they had chosen peace instead of revenge. He wondered if his empire, with all its power and pride, could ever do the same. When the morning came, the council gathered once more in the grand hall. The air was tense because no one knew what the Emperor would decide. Some ministers hoped he would prepare for war. Others prayed he would choose peace. The Emperor rose slowly from his seat and looked around the room. He said the Empire had forgotten its past and its purpose. It had ruled the stars through fear and control, but now the time had come to change. He said that the humans had shown them that strength was not in domination, but in endurance. There was silence when he finished speaking. Then he turned to Admiral Terran and said he would send him back to the humans with an offer. Not a treaty of surrender and not an alliance of convenience, but an open hand of peace. Admiral Terran bowed his head. He felt the weight of history in that single command. The Empire had never offered peace before. He knew that this decision would divide the nobles and military leaders, but he also knew it was the only way forward. He left the chamber and went straight to the hangar to prepare his ship. As he walked through the corridors, he noticed that the people he passed looked at him differently now, some with hope and others with anger. The news had already spread across the capital. The humans had returned and the Emperor wanted peace. Rian was waiting at the docking bay, already in his flight uniform. When Terran told him the mission, his eyes widened. He asked if it was true that the Emperor wanted to talk to the humans as equals. Terran nodded and said quietly that it was time to stop pretending the Empire was eternal. Every empire falls eventually, but maybe theirs could learn before it was too late. They boarded the Valen's Pride again, and the ship lifted into the dark sky, heading toward the edge of the system. The journey through space was silent. The crew spoke little because everyone felt the same strange mix of fear and wonder. When they arrived near the Sol system again, the human fleet was already waiting. The UNS Resolute moved forward slowly, its hull glinting with golden light from the nearby sun. A signal came through immediately and Captain Reyes appeared on the screen. His calm expression did not change when he saw Terran. He simply nodded and asked what had brought the Empire back so soon. Terran said the Emperor wished to meet him face to face, not through a screen or a message. Reyes listened for a long moment before agreeing. He said the meeting would take place on Luna, the ancient moon of Earth. The Imperial shuttle descended through the pale silver light, landing on a wide plain where an old human base had been rebuilt. The structures were clean and simple, surrounded by the quiet beauty of space. From the surface, Earth filled the sky above them, glowing blue and white. Terran and Rion stepped out of the shuttle and walked toward a large hall where the meeting would take place. The doors opened and Captain Reyes stood waiting with a group of human officers. His eyes were steady but not cold. He extended his hand again and Terran took it. This time the handshake felt different. It felt like the beginning of something rather than the end. They sat across a long table with only a few guards at the edges of the room. The humans offered water and small pieces of fruit from the colonies. The Emperor's message was delivered through Terran's own voice. He said the Empire did not come to demand or to threaten. It came to acknowledge the truth. He said the humans had shown the galaxy that memory was stronger than pride. He read the Emperor's words slowly, saying that the Empire wanted peace built on respect and shared history. When he finished, the room was quiet. Captain Reyes stood and walked toward the window. He looked out at the Earth above and said softly that the humans had waited centuries for this day. He said that peace was possible, but only if the Empire was ready to face its own darkness. He said that humans had learned from pain and loss that no civilization survives forever, unless it remembers where it began. He turned back to Terran and asked if the Emperor truly understood what peace would cost. Terran answered that he did. He said that change always costs something, but the price of never changing was far greater. The meeting lasted for hours. They spoke about trade, communication, and borders. But mostly they spoke about the future. Reyes said humanity would help the Empire rebuild its broken colonies and restore balance in the outer worlds where corruption and cruelty had taken root. In return, the Empire would open its archives and share the knowledge it had gathered through the centuries. They both agreed that the galaxy needed unity, not under one flag but through understanding. After the meeting ended, Reyes took Terran to a small observatory on the far side of the base. From there, the view of Earth was even clearer. The oceans shimmered like silver glass and the clouds drifted slowly across the continents. Reyes said that this was what they fought to protect. Not just a planet, but the memory of what humanity could be. Terran said quietly that maybe the Empire had needed to see this before it could believe it. He thanked Reyes for his patience. Reyes smiled faintly and said patience was the only weapon that never failed. When Terran returned to his ship, he felt lighter. For the first time in years, he believed that the Empire could change. On the way back, Rion asked him what would happen next. Terran said the hardest part was still to come. Making peace was easy compared to keeping it. But he believed they had taken the first step. The Valen's pride returned to Vareth Prime, and Terran delivered the humans' response to the Emperor. The Emperor read it slowly and smiled faintly for the first time in many years. He said that the stars had been silent for too long and now they were beginning to speak again. Months passed and slowly the change began. The Empire sent envoys to human space, and the humans sent teachers and engineers to the outer colonies. The trade routes opened and new stations were built that carried both imperial and human flags. People who had once feared each other began to talk, to trade, and to share. The old walls of hatred started to fade. The Emperor created a new council that included voices from the border worlds, and even some from the human colonies. It was not perfect, but it was a start. Rion was assigned to one of the joint stations orbiting a small world near the edge of the Orion Belt. He worked with human officers every day and learned about their ways. They were different from what he had expected. They were calm but determined, patient but firm. He learned that their strength came from endurance, not aggression. At night, he would sit by the window of his quarters and look out at the stars, wondering how many secrets they still held. On Mars, Captain Reyes watched the progress reports coming from every corner of the galaxy. He saw hope growing where there had once been only fear. He knew it would take time, maybe generations, before true trust was built. But the seed had been planted. Sometimes he would walk outside at night and look up at the sky, seeing the faint light of the imperial world shining in the distance. He knew that somewhere out there, people were beginning to remember that they all came from the same place. Years later, on the anniversary of the first meeting, the Emperor stood before the Imperial Palace balcony and addressed the people. He spoke of the humans and the lessons they had taught. He said that power without compassion leads to emptiness, and memory without understanding leads to sorrow. He declared that from that day onward, the Empire would no longer call itself the ruler of the stars, but the guardian of them. The people cheered, though many still did not fully understand. But in that moment, something in the heart of the Empire began to heal. In the far distance, near the quiet orbit of Earth, the UNS Resolute continued its silent watch. Captain Reyes stood by the window looking down at the blue planet below. He thought of the Emperor's words and of Admiral Terran's courage. He knew the road ahead would still be hard, but he also knew that this time, history had a chance to take a different path. He whispered softly to himself that the stars remember, and this time they would not forget again. As the ship drifted quietly over the shining curve of Earth, the light of the sun rose behind it, spreading across the dark like a promise. For the first time in thousands of years, humanity and the Empire shared the same dawn, and the galaxy itself seemed to breathe in peace.